Okay, the idea that there's a major difference physiologically between heartbeat and heart rate. Okay, heartbeat is controlled by the neural tissue that's in your heart. Heartbeat is actually controlled by your heart. Okay, whereas heart rate is controlled by the base of your brain, where the spinal cord connects to the base of the brain. It's called the brainstem, and there's a specific structure back in there called the medulla oblongata, and that actually controls heart rate. So your whole heart beat, the heart contraction of the heart, is actually caused by the spontaneous depolarization of a little piece of neural tissue in the top right of the heart called the sinoatrial node, or the SA node. That wave then moves across or propagates across the top of the heart. When that wave then hits a second bundle of neural tissue called the atrioventricular node, or the AV node, there's nothing subtle about the impulse now. This impulse now fires through the AV node to the bundle of His, to the Purkinje fibers at 200 miles an hour. The impulse is only going maybe about this far. So imagine how fast it goes from here to here at 200 miles an hour. I mean, it's not instantaneous, but it's really close. All right. So then the AV node transfers the impulse to the bundle of His. That is then, the impulse is then transferred to the Purkinje fibers, and the entire bottom half of the heart contracts at once. So the top is a squeeze from right to left. So it's squeeze and then all at once, boom. So lub dub, 1, 2. Okay, so that's heartbeat. Heart rate is then based on the pH of your blood, actually. When we exercise, cell rest dumps carbon dioxide into our blood, which then mixes with the water in our blood, makes carbonic acid. That lowers the pH of our blood. When the pH of our blood drops, that is regulated or monitored by the base of your brain in the medulla. When the pH starts to drop, there is an impulse that comes from your brain to your heart, and that increases heart rate. That same impulse actually hits your diaphragm too, and increases your breathing rate as well. We'll talk about that in about a week after break. Okay, so then Ivy loves to ask you guys about the difference between heartbeat and heart rate. This is a classic essay question. This is like plants versus animals, procs versus eucs, mitosis versus meiosis. These are just classic biology questions. Okay, then since we're talking about an impulse through the heart, we have the ability to track that electromagnetic impulse. We actually track the disturbance that impulse creates. So this is a graph of the electrical activity in your heart. So thus it is an electrocardiogram, electro-heart graph. Okay, the first machines that were produced that tracked the electrocardiograph or the electrocardiogram were produced in Germany. So the sign on the side of the machine said EKG. So you will hear me call this an EKG because that's how I was trained. You will also hear people call it an ECG. It's the same thing. Okay, this is a holdover. This is an old school term from the first machines that came out. So this is the classic beep, beep, beep that you hear when you're in a hospital. That machine that provides that graph of the impulses in the heart, that's your EKG machine. They then set a specific tone so that every time this impulse goes through your heart, the machine then makes a beep. They also then have an alarm connected that when there's no signal, it's that same beep, which is why they refer to it then as a flatline. When someone flatlines, there's no impulse going through their heart, therefore their heart is not contracting. Since their heart is not contracting, we call that cardiac arrest. That's not a heart attack, okay? That's different. A heart attack is when the cells of the heart die, okay? That's a myocardial infarction, right? What we're talking about here is cardiac arrest. To arrest means to stop. So when your heart stops beating, that's cardiac arrest, and you flatline because your EKG is no longer moving up and down, it's flat, so you're flatlining. So there are these three classic peaks or bumps to an EKG. The first peak is the impulse as it goes through the atria. Notice how this is a smaller, weaker, and also longer impulse, okay? Because the heart contracts basically from top to bottom and right to left with the atria. You then get the contraction of the ventricles. Notice the height of that peak is higher. Why? Because that contraction is harder. Also, notice how this peak is skinnier. Why is it skinnier? Because this is less time. Okay. Then this is actually the repolarization of the nerves. That means nothing to you now. It will mean more in about 3 weeks when we talk about how nerves function and how after a nerve impulse or an action potential goes by, then the nerve has to repolarize. So this is actually called repolarization, and we'll talk more about it later. Super cool videos that we posted on YouTube for you. Okay, so I'm really hoping that you've had the chance to watch this first one, where you should loop this and simply watch one part of the heart. Watch the right atrium, watch the left atrium, watch a semi-lunar valve, watch an AV valve. Okay, focus on one part of the heart, turn the sound down, and just watch one part of the heart. And then wait for the video to loop, and then watch a different part of the heart, and focus on the different parts of the heart. Okay, to take the entire heart contraction all at once, there's a lot going on. So watch this video without sound, get comfortable with all the pieces and parts, then back it up, turn the sound on, and then handle the content. This is an excellent video. And of course, if you don't like this one, YouTube has hundreds of these. It's a fantastic teaching resource. Then there are 2 videos after that. Yeah, I already posted those in Facebook. Takes you through the EKG and shows you in a much slower version how the heart contracts, how the electrical impulses go through the heart, cause the heart to contract and drive the blood through the heart. And then they then put side by side. It's super cool. They then show you the different peaks of what are commonly called PR and T waves. IV doesn't focus so much on the PQRST waves. When you get into this, if any of you go for STEM majors, human anatomy and physiology, if you're going to do anything in medicine, you're to know PQRST really, really well. IB doesn't hold you accountable for that. But if you're interested, the content's right there. And then the other video, the introduction of this one's cool because it shows you the heart looks like externally when it beats. The heart here, you see how it's slightly tipped. Your heart actually tips kind of back into your chest. And so the atria actually here and the ventricles sit in the front. Then they show you here how the electrodes scoop basically around the pectoral muscle and a little bit to your side. Here's the classic EKG or ECG, right? And then it beeps every time you have a completed PQRST wave, all right? But don't forget, IB does not hold you accountable for the PQRST. It's cool, right? And then this takes you through, it's just awesome. Takes you through what is happening in each step of the contraction. It's just fantastic. YouTube is wonderful. Love it. Okay, so spend some time watching some videos, put the TikTok down, right? And watch some science. It's awesome. All right, before we leave heart contraction, are you okay there? Does that all make sense? That was about 4 days of content in about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Dig it. All right. So we have one question on topic 2. It's 2F. 2F wants us to talk about how we can change heart rate. I have a copy of your questions around here somewhere. Yeah, there. Okay. So 2F says the heart rate can be increased or decreased by impulses brought to the heart through 2 nerves from the brain, from the medulla in the brain. Then it says epinephrine, or what you commonly call adrenaline, increases the heart rate to prepare for vigorous activity. Fine, we can handle this. So this will be 2F. Let's just make this a touch bigger for you because this answer is short. Just like that. So what you call adrenaline chemically is called epinephrine. This is why when people have severe allergies and they may have issues with their trachea swelling shut, this hormone, super powerful, and it does a wonderful job. It's a vasodilator. It makes blood vessels and airways dilate. So if someone has severe allergies or asthma, they may carry an EpiPen, and it's called an EpiPen because what it really is it's shaped like a pen, and it contains epinephrine. So if their trachea starts to swell shut with an inappropriately severe immune response, you dump some epinephrine into their blood, and their trachea dilates, and they can breathe and do cellular respiration. So this is a powerful hormone. It's not the most powerful. We will talk about the most powerful hormone in core 11. It's called oxytocin and causes the uterus to contract and push out the baby. It is by far, oxytocin is by far the most powerful hormone. It's amazing. All right, so one of the things that adrenaline does, or that epinephrine does, is it increases heart rate. And you have all experienced this. You watch a horror movie, you ride a roller coaster, you public speak, and the base of your brain interprets that emotional threat based on our evolutionary history of our fight or flight response, dumps epinephrine into your bloodstream, elevates your metabolism, dilates the pupils, and dilates all of your blood vessels and your airways, and you are ready to rock and roll. That experience, that's the fight or flight response. That when you were threatened as a predator, from a predator, by a predator probably, you have a choice. You either stand your ground and fight, or you run, which is flight. And so that's the fight or flight response. And so what this does is epinephrine actually does two things. Not only increases heart rate. What else do you notice about the contraction when we are flying high on adrenaline? You ever feel your heartbeat when you're on adrenaline?
You can like hear it like in your ears.
Totally, right? You can feel it thumping in your chest. You're standing close to people thinking, can they hear me? Can they doom, 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 right? The contraction itself is much stronger. You can also sometimes hear the blood rushing as the carotid artery bends and goes behind the eardrum. If your heartbeat is strong enough, some people can actually hear it in their ears. It's pretty powerful. So it increases the strength, strength, of heart contraction. And what this really is it's an evolutionary response to a threat. What we call your fight or flight response. Like that. Okay, so medulla, pH of the blood, and epinephrine all impact heart rate, and then the SA node and AV node are heartbeat. That. Any questions on that before we go on to blood clotting? Let's talk about hemophilia, shall we? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the adrenaline used to increase the heart rate when you're working out too, or only when you get scared? Or
okay, you can. Some people do take adrenaline or other compounds that will raise your adrenaline levels while you exercise. I personally don't do that, and I wouldn't recommend doing that because your blood pressure is already elevated in the exercise activity. And if you take a stimulant, either epinephrine or something that causes you to release epinephrine, like caffeine, people will hammer caffeine right before they work out. And you got to be really careful with that because caffeine does the opposite of what epinephrine does to your blood vessels. Okay, caffeine and other stimulants make your blood vessels contract. Okay, so if you make your blood vessels contract and then the caffeine and the adrenaline increases heart rate, what does an increased heart rate do to your blood pressure?
increases it?
Increases it. Then caffeine makes the blood vessels smaller. So you're now putting more pressure on a blood vessel that's constricted. What's going to happen when you get to be my age and 60? What's going to happen to the walls of that blood vessel?
Burst.
It's going to burst. It's going to rupture. Okay. So I am a very strong proponent against stimulants or any other epinephrine, or another one that you'll see is ephedrine. You need to be really careful with the supplements that you take. Ephedrine. I should look up to confirm the spelling. I'm pretty sure that's right. Ephedrine is what's called a derivative of epinephrine. This is also a stimulant, and this will increase heart rate, but since it's a stimulant, it causes blood vessels to contract, and it can be really dangerous. So it's not so much a risk when you're, I mean, there's a small risk when you're young. This is more of the wear and tear that you're doing to the heart and the blood vessels over time. When you get into supplements and other compounds, understand that it's a teeter-totter, okay? And the more that you lean on your physiology, the more you lean on your biology now, right? That causes an imbalance, and that means that you've got a price to pay when you're 40, 50, and 60 years old, okay? So notice that the majority of people that hammer supplements, and they're all big and loamy and huge. Do you ever see guys 40, 50, 60-year-olds that still look like that?
No.
No, because they either blow out their shoulders, or they blow out their kidneys, or they ruin their liver. Okay, so if you get into exercise, do yourself a favor and look at the old timers who are still fit. Look at the people who are in their late 30s, late 40s, late 50s, and if they're still fit, mimic what they do, and that's how you will have that same fitness. Okay, biology is all about balance, so just be really careful with the supplements, because there's a price to pay, and it may be a short-term gain, but it could have long-term consequences. And I know I totally sound like a teacher and a parent and an old guy, and I get it, but I'm telling you that now that, I mean, I've been exercising 30 years, and the way that you have longevity is it's consistency. You get too high here, there's always a valley, so just be careful. And any of the labels of the supplements that you take, read them and look that stuff up, okay? Please, please, please be very aware of what you put into your body. It's important. And what's interesting is any of it regulated by the FDA? Do you guys know this?
No.
No, none of the supplements that are sold by, let's say, a GNC, what's that, a General Nutrition Center, right? None of that stuff is regulated by the FDA.
Wait, really?
Yeah, really, because it's not a pharmaceutical. It's never been run through clinical trials, and it's never been approved by the FDA. Yep.
Wait, so
that
they can still sell it. So they can still sell it without an FDA approval?
absolutely, as long as it's considered a dietary supplement. And I can put whatever I want on the label as well. Let's see if I can find a vitamin. Hold on. I can put whatever I want on the label, and then you'll see a little. Let's see, we buy the clean stuff. It's probably not going to be on here. There'll be a little. It looks like a cross, like, this kind of cross, and you'll turn the product over, and it'll say these statements have not been tested or verified by the FDA. And so it'll say, causes weight loss, or will help you sleep through the night, or whatever. And then afterwards, there'll be an asterisk, or there'll be a little cross. And if you turn the bottle over, that's what it'll say. So they can state whatever they want on the front, as long as they then put a disclaimer, and then you turn the product over and it says, has never been tested by the FDA. Yeah, the only thing, I don't have an example. The only thing the FDA tests is food products and compounds that are considered pharmaceuticals. Anything that is considered a dietary supplement or even vitamins is not tested or monitored or regulated by the FDA. Okay. Now there are restrictions in what they can put in it. For instance, you can't dump a bunch of steroids into your protein powder. That's illegal because steroids are a controlled substance. They can't put adrenaline directly into the supplement. What they do is they cheat, and that's where ephedrine comes from. Okay, ephedrine is closely related to epinephrine. And so your body sees the ephedrine and responds to it in a similar way. Your response isn't quite as strong, but it's very, very similar. And you still get the adrenaline boost. You still get the adrenaline rush without taking adrenaline straight, because adrenaline also is a controlled substance. In fact, in very severe cases, if the heart isn't beating, if they really want to go to the extreme, what's that called, the last full measure, they will inject adrenaline directly into the heart, but that is an absolute last ditch effort. They sometimes do that during heart surgeries, because to work on the heart, right, you can't do surgery on a muscle that's contracting. So what they actually do is they open the chest and they put cool paddles, stainless steel paddles on each side of the heart, and they cool the heart down. They chill it. And as your heart gets colder, it actually stops. Okay, so technically, when they work on someone's heart and they do open heart surgery, they stop their heart. They kill them. I mean, doctors don't like to say they kill them, but I'm telling you, they stop their heart. Okay, they then disconnect the pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein, and they connect that to a machine that temporarily oxygenates the blood. That's called a heart-lung machine. And so then while the heart is turned off, the heart sits there, they do the surgery. And then when it comes time to restart the heart, they gradually warm it back up. They reconnect the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary vein. And then what they literally do is they tap the heart. With your chest open, they tap on it. Okay? These are like minor compressions. And if that doesn't work, I'm not making this up, they flick it. Serious, right? If that doesn't work, right, then they have little paddles, little defibrillators that they will put into your chest, and they'll do little micro pulses, little zaps to your heart. If that doesn't work, then they'll give you a stronger jolt. And if that doesn't work, they inject the adrenaline. And if your heart still doesn't start, then they pronounce you dead. They sew you up and they go talk to the family. Okay, so there's a reason why when you get into surgery, some surgeons get pretty arrogant because the responsibility and, in all honesty, the power that they literally hold in their hands, they hold people's lives in their hands on a daily basis. They can have that job. That's way too much responsibility for me. But they, if you're interested in that, my hat is off to you. Go get highly educated and you will be highly, highly paid. In medicine, your responsibility and your paycheck match. Do you know who is paid more than surgeons? This is an interesting question.
Anesthesiologists?
Yes, anesthesiologists make more than almost every surgeon, except for heart surgeons and brain surgeons. Okay, when you start getting into heart, brain, and anesthesiology, they're pretty equal. Okay, what's the job of an anesthesiologist?
Control the amount of anesthesia.
Yep. They put you to sleep. Okay, when they do their job well, you go to sleep, you come back, no sweat. Okay. What happens if they don't put you down far enough and you wake up? Can you imagine waking up in the middle of surgery, right? Your body's literally wide open and you wake up? That would be horrific, okay? But what happens if they put you to sleep too much? What happens if they suppress your nervous system too much?
Doesn't your heart stop?
You put the person into a coma and then you'll anesthetize them. You'll kill them. Okay. Have you ever had an animal put to sleep? Have you had this experience? It's not very positive. Well, it can be depending on the quality of life for the animal, right? But if I say euthanasia, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So if you suppress the nervous system so much that the brain shuts down, okay, then you are killing the person, whether it's a mercy killing or quality of life. That's a whole TOK discussion. There's a lot to that. But if an anesthesiologist puts you down too much, they can put you into a coma and kill you, basically. So an anesthesiologist's job is the classic, what's the fairy tale? Too much, too little, just right. Goldilocks principle. There we go. In that the anesthesiologist wants to put you asleep just enough that you don't wake up, but not so much that they put you into a coma and anesthetize you. That would be bad. Yeah. So those people make tremendous amounts of money because their work has to be perfect every time. If it's not perfect, you either don't wake up ever, or you wake up in the middle of the surgery, and that would be holy smokes.
Mr. Manuel,
Yes.
if the anesthesiologist, if they do their job wrong, can they like lose their license,
Oh, that's a great
or
question.
is it like excused basically?
Okay, that is such a gray area because if they are on drugs, if they are, not that alcohol isn't a drug, but if they were on illicit drugs, if they are intoxicated with alcohol, if they are if they are reckless in their practice, if there's something that's called malicious intent or reckless disregard for the patients, those are the legal terms, then that is the foundation of what's called a malpractice suit. So if you can prove that the person made an egregious error, made an error that they should have known better, they were told not to do, and they did it anyway, then yeah, you can sue them for malpractice. However, when you first go into the hospital, there's multiple forms that you have to sign, or if you're a minor, they're signed by your adult. And in those forms, it says, except for malpractice, there is a risk every time you go under anesthetic. And you are signing away that I know that there's a risk and that things happen, and I will not sue you. So Dawn had a procedure done about, well, let's see, M is 20, so it was about 22 years ago, shortly before M was born. Dawn went in to treat a condition called endometriosis. And it should have been an outpatient basis, should have been 45 minutes in, out. She'd had the procedure twice before. We're like, oh, we know how to do this, no sweat. And during the procedure, they put 3 tools inside of you. One is a camera, one is a light, and then the other one is the tool that the surgeon is working with. There was a rough edge on one of the tools, and it nicked an abdominal blood vessel in Dawn. And we weren't sure if it was an artery or a vein. If it was an artery, it could have been life-threatening. They would have had to open her up like a book, and it was hairy for a while. And that was not we did not have the right to sue them for malpractice because it was a flaw in the tool. It wasn't the surgeon's fault. It wasn't where the tool was mishandled or misproduced. Things like this happen. What you're asking is it's not a clear-cut case where, oh yes, you can sue that person for malpractice because the doctor should have known better. It really depends on a case-by-case basis. Yep. Yes.
I have a question about the heart surgery. How do they just like disconnect the pulmonary artery? How does that work?
With extreme care. When they stop the heart, your blood pressure goes to 0. And so then the pulmonary blood vessels are soft. And so you get a sponge underneath and you cut them. And then you take tubing, which in all honesty looks a lot like aquarium tubing, but it's sterile. And they take that tubing and they insert it inside of your pulmonary artery, and then they put a gentle clamp around it, and they turn the pump on, and then the pump starts physically pushing the blood through your body while there are mechanisms in the machine that oxygenate your blood. And that's called a heart-lung machine. You can be on that for, depends on your age, about 8, 10, maybe 12 hours before the clamp that's holding your tissue around the tube, the clamp is pinching the tissue and the tissue starts to die. That's what actually keeps you from being able to stay on the heart-lung machine all the time, is because you have to clamp tissue to the silicone tubes of the machine. You guys can go on YouTube. It's graphic. Understand? They cut through the sternum with a circular saw. It's a bone saw, okay? And they cut right through the sternum, right? Then they get these things called rib spreaders, and it's a device that goes around the back, and it clamps, literally clamps in between the cut in the sternum, and they start turning this handle, and it ratchets open, and it breaks your ribs open. And so the surgeon cuts the bone and then starts turning the handle and they spread your ribs open. And then they go and then they take the heart and they chill it down. They stop it, cut the pulmonary blood vessels, connect them to the heart-lung machine, and now we can start working on your heart. It's really invasive. But yeah, go on YouTube and type in heart surgery, open heart surgery, because you can do heart surgery where if it's a minor surgery, they can sneak between the ribs, right? And they'll put tools between your ribs to get to the heart. But if they actually need to handle the heart, they call that open heart surgery, because guess what they have to open? Your chest cavity. Yeah, it's super intense. So take care of your heart, exercise, and watch how much fat you eat. Seriously. All right, we need to talk about blood clotting. Okay, so we're going to do a very, very fancy drawing. So let's draw a blood vessel. So let's draw some epithelial cells, like such, and just draw a series of them. So what are you looking at here? This is the wall of the blood vessel. Oh, I'm leaning. I should bring the piece of paper to me. Why lean to the paper? Bring the paper to me. Cool. So then give yourself some space. I'd say about maybe 3-4 centimeters. And then draw another wall of the blood vessel over here. But do yourself a favor and leave a hole in it. You see how I've left a gap here? That's intentional. Because since we're talking about bleeding, what bleeding is when your blood vessel, usually a blood vessel is a solid tube, it's a pipe, and we're going to have a leaker. So blood flow, boom, okay? So blood has different cells in it, right? And when you put blood under the microscope, you have certain cells that are red. And since these are cells of the blood and under the microscope they're red, gee, guess what we call them?
Red blood cells.
Red blood cells. And then when you put, and the job of red blood cells is to carry carbon dioxide and oxygen. They function in gas exchange. Red blood cells are nothing more than a big bag of that protein called hemoglobin. And so they're red under the microscope, so we call them red blood cells. There's other cells of your blood that when you put them under the microscope, they're clear. And since they're clear, that means that the light comes right through them. And since the light comes right through them, they appear white. They're really not white, they're clear. But we call them white because they look white under the microscope. So therefore you have white blood cells. White blood cells are the cells of your immune system. We will talk a lot more about this in just a topic or two. I think it's topic 3. Oh, it's right now. And these protect you from infection, okay? You then have another type of blood cell that's long and thin, and it looks like a dinner plate. Thus, we call them platelets. These are platelets, 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 platelets. Okay, and I should label it platelet. It's a platelet because it literally, it's flat, round, looks like a dinner plate. Now, floating around in the cytoplasm of all blood cells. So if we were to zoom in on, this is a blood vessel cell. So if you were to zoom in on the cell that makes up the wall of the blood vessel, get over there, there we go. Floating around in the cytoplasm are proteins called clotting factors. And gee, guess what? What do you think these clotting factors cause your blood to do?
Not flow properly.
Right. It actually causes them to clot. Okay. So these proteins sit inside That says CF, by the way. You probably can't see that. Get that back. These proteins, these clotting factors, sit inside of these blood vessel cells. And as long as you don't open these cells, will the clotting factors ever get out? No, they just sit there, okay? But let's say that you have trauma to the area and your blood vessel cells are cut, burst, or rip open, okay? So usually your blood vessel cells hold these proteins called clotting factors. There's some trauma, there's cut. Could be blunt force trauma and these blood vessel cells rupture. When these blood vessel cells rupture, they release the proteins that are in their cytoplasm. Well, what protein is in their cytoplasm?
The clotting factor.
The clotting factors, okay? Because if you've traumatized that blood vessel has ruptured, and once the blood vessel ruptures, blood will then leak out. When blood leaks out, we refer to that as bleeding. That's all bleeding is. Bleeding is when a pipe that's usually closed, a blood vessel, usually has blood flowing through it, something traumatic happens to that blood vessel and the blood vessel opens. You now have a leaking pipe. Now, they're usually capillaries and small veins, but if it's a large vein or an artery, it can be life-threatening. But the only time that the clotting factors escape from the cells or the blood vessel cells is when there's trauma, right? Okay, so what? So the clotting factors leak out. Usually, platelets are very slippery. Usually, the surface membrane proteins of the platelets allow the cells just to slide by. However, when the surface membrane proteins of platelets are activated by clotting factors, then these platelets aren't slippery anymore. Guess what they become? What's the opposite of slippery?
Sticky.
Sticky. Okay? So usually platelets, if they're inactive, if a platelet is inactive, the platelet is slippery. Okay? However, you get trauma. The blood vessel cells rupture. The blood vessel cells release clotting factors. The clotting factors activate the surface membrane proteins on a platelet and make the platelet sticky. Why would you want the platelet to become sticky?
To block the
Exactly, to clog the opening in the pipe. So here is your blood vessel. You have trauma, right? You have blood leaking out. And once the clotting factors are released, that makes the platelets sticky. And they literally make a big pile because the platelets become sticky. They are attracted to where the clotting factors are released. And they make what, when I was a kid, we used to play a game called Dog Pile, right? And I understand that there's a similar game called Bolita. You guys ever play this game as children?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Now, when I was a kid, there'd be a group of people, and all of a sudden somebody would yell somebody's name and yell dog pile, or they'd yell dog pile and somebody's name. And it was we had the social responsibility to then we all just jump on top of that person. I'm surprised we didn't suffocate them and crush them. And we would just make a big pile of human beings on this person. What are the rules of Bolita? How was that game played?
The way my cousins and I play, we just do it randomly. Like it
Yep.
doesn't become an official game. It's just, oh, attack this person, and then we all just go on top of them.
I love it. Yep, same thing. Yeah, there's no reason for it, right? You just kind of go, today's your day, right? I love it when childhood games go across all cultures. It's beautiful. All right, so there's a now on the IB exam. Don't write Bolita. That's to help you remember. The fancy name for this is called platelet aggregation. When things aggregate, they come together, okay? So this is called platelet aggregation. And platelet aggregation only occurs when clotting factors are released. Clotting factors are only released when what happens to the blood vessel cells?
They release cytoplasm.
Yep, and they only release their cytoplasm when there's trauma, right? Whether that's blunt force or a cut or some other damage that causes the blood vessels to rupture, okay?
Mr. Monroe, I have a
Yes.
question.
Name it.
What if you don't have enough of the clotting factors? Like, does it just happen slower? Or does it not happen at all?
Is awesome. Okay, so what we're going to get into next is this is a step-by-step process. It's called a cascade, and depending on the concentration of each protein at each step changes how effectively your blood clots, which is why there's different forms and different severities of hemophilia. Okay, if you have all of the proteins in the cascade, but you just have a slightly lower concentration, then you have a mild form of hemophilia. However, if you are missing large amounts of clotting factors, or you carry a mutation and your clotting factor doesn't work, then you have a very severe case of hemophilia. So it's a great question. Okay, so understand that this is a step-by-step process, but what has to happen first is you have to have damaged, is that right? Yeah. Damaged blood vessel cells, what we call trauma. Trauma, T-R-A-M-U-A, is that right? Trauma. I think the U's here, T-R-A-U-M-A, T-R-A-U-M-A. There it is. I should have read more as a child. Trauma. Okay. So this causes the blood vessel cells to rupture. And what do the blood vessel cells release?
Clotting factors.
Clotting factors. What do these clotting factors, how do they change platelets?
Make them molecularly sticky.
Yes. And this is actually the term that you're going to use on the IB exam. It makes them sticky. Okay. Which, once you have the platelets are sticky, they are drawn to the area of trauma. They physically stick together, and that is a clot. Now, if that clot happens on the surface of your skin and it dries, guess what we call it?
Scab.
That's a scab. We've all had scabs. I have a couple on my hands right now. Why? Because I had some trauma to my hands, right? I abraded the skin, right? I broke the skin. The blood leaked out. My clotting factors were released. The platelets said, I got it. They stuck together. And on the surface of my skin, it then forms a scab. Okay? So this process that goes step by step by step like such, in biochemistry, we call this a cascade. Whenever there is a biochemical process that goes step 1, step 2, step 3, and they're like dominoes, that's referred to as a cascade. So do you think there's a little bit more detail to this than just the clotting factors bond to the platelets and it just magically forms a scab?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, so we will break this down into 4 steps. Understand that when you take human physiology and biochemistry in college, amazing class. They're going to put 12 steps in this process, all right? It's not difficult, it's just more detail, all right? But for right now, we will summarize this process into 4 steps. So we'll go 1. Which question is this? This is 3A. Really? I wrote a 2? Getting in right? This paper has bad image. Let's try that again. There we go. We have 1, and then we'll have 2, and we'll have 3, and then we'll have 4. 4 steps, like such. You guys will never look at a scab the same way again. It's awesome. All right, so what gets released first? The clotting factors from damaged cells. Trauma, okay, causes cell death, and they release the clotting factors that usually sit in their cytoplasm. Now, if some of the platelets are activated because there's a low concentration of clotting factors, you have a small clot, no big deal. However, if you have a large release of clotting factors and you stimulate a large number of platelets, there's a second wave of clotting factor release, except that comes from the platelets. So for a minor little cut, you stop here. Platelet aggregation, you're done, right? But a severe cut, right? The platelets are stimulated and then the platelets release their own clotting factors. So there can be a second wave. So this will be a first wave here of clotting factors. And if it's a severe cut, there'll be a second wave of clotting factors from the platelets. This might be a cut, let's say from a knife. Let's say you're chopping some vegetables, right? You get a little careless with that big old knife and you cut yourself, right? It's not life-threatening, but it's like, man, that's a deep cut. You'll get clotting factors from the platelets. Okay, what does this second wave of clotting factors cause? All right, there's a protein that floats around in your blood called prothrombin. This is an inactive protein. Floats around in your blood all the time. When the clotting factors reach a high level, that prothrombin is converted. It's converted by clotting factors, a high concentration of them, and it's converted into thrombin. And one of the things that thrombin does is it makes platelets more sticky. So this increases platelet aggregation. This increases the effectiveness of the formation of a clot. Okay? However, if you get high concentrations of thrombin, that means that you have a very severe cut. If you have a very severe cut, there's another protein in your blood called fibrinogen. Oh, and I didn't label this as active. Fibrinogen floats around in your blood all the time, but it's inactive. And when fibrinogen is stimulated by high concentrations of thrombin, fibrinogen forms a protein called fibrin. Now, fibrin is called fibrin because here it's a liquid. This is so cool. This is an inactive liquid. And when fibrin is activated, it becomes a solid. And why do you think it's called fibrin? Because fibrin is from the Latin root fiber. It makes this. It makes a netting type of protein, okay? So if you have a very large wound and the blood is flowing out, the fibrin goes from the liquid fibrinogen to the solid fibrin, and it literally makes a net. And then what gets trapped in that net? All of the cells from your blood that are flowing through the wound. As those cells get stuck to the fibrin, you're actually forming an even larger clot. So you only use fibrinogen converted into fibrin when it's a serious wound. Okay, this is where I was out in the front yard about 2 months ago using some pruning shears. And I decided to take my glove off to do some work, and it was a mistake. And I almost cut the end of my finger off. I took about 3 to 4 millimeters off the end of my finger. I thought I'd lost the end of my finger forever. It grew back. The nerves aren't quite what they should be, but at least I have a fingertip. And that was the fibrin for sure. That wound bled forever. Okay, so this is only for very severe cuts, but this is what we call a cascade. It's a 4-step process. Okay. So earlier when Ms. Nunez asked about hemophilia, it all depends on, ready? There's a protein here, there's a protein here, there's a protein here. Depending on your concentration of each of these proteins, or if any of these proteins are mutated and don't work properly, those are different types of hemophilia, okay? So if you have a low concentration of this clotting protein, or it's mutated and it doesn't work properly, you still have hemophilia, but you have the least severe form of hemophilia. Because while this last step doesn't work very well, do you still get the previous 3 steps?
Yes.
Yes. Where is the most severe case of hemophilia?
Fibrinogen.
Keep other way. What happens if your primary clotting factors have a mutation and don't work? Does this whole cascade happen?
No.
No. Therefore, if you have a mutation here or very low levels of this clotting factor here, you have the most severe form of hemophilia. Let's see if I can spell philia. There we go. Okay, so it all depends on which proteins don't work for you in this cascade. Jonas, do you have any other questions on this before we go on? Silence. I'm gonna take that as a no. All right, so let's talk about treatment. How do you treat someone with hemophilia? The most common form of treatment is injections of clotting factors. If these individuals are missing the protein, you inject it into them. Okay? Not now. Right? So these clotting factors can come from one of 2 places. You can donate blood. Now, there's 2 kinds of blood donations. You can donate plasma, or you can do what's called whole unit donations. So if you donate plasma, it's just the liquid, and you donate the liquid, they give you your cells back, and you can actually do that every day. Whereas if you donate the cells, it takes 5 to 6 weeks to replace all the cells. So you donate a whole unit once every 6 to 8 weeks. Or, since these clotting factors are proteins, where else can we get human proteins besides human donors?
GMOs.
Yep. From good old E. coli by transformation. So when I stood up and down and jumped up and down and said, not all GMOs are bad, you can't ban all GMOs, you'll kill all of the diabetics, it's really, really serious. Guess which other group of people really think GMOs are special?
Yes.
Hemophiliacs, okay? So if you have access to, I don't have any of the products because we don't have a hemophiliac on staff. But if they have to designate whether the clotting factor is of human origin or whether it's a product of a GMO. And then we need to do image. It's from chapter 42. Where is it? 42:18. We need to do image 42:18. And then we are done for the day. So there's more biochemistry to this than those 4 steps, nothing to be afraid of. Just know that when you go to college and take anatomical biochemistry, fantastic class, holy cow, okay? But it is, they will take the same process. And while your classmates are learning this process for the first time, you will have an introductory idea of it. And you get to listen to or add the details. It's awesome. May I take this?
Mr. Manor, I have a question.
Yes. Name it.
So why do people with diabetes have to be really careful to not get cuts?
Why do diabetics have to be careful not to get cuts?
Yeah, that's what I've been told.
I don't know. Can you let me do some homework?
Sure.
I'd assume it's because of the high blood pressure.
I don't know. I don't know that diabetics necessarily always have high blood. I don't know. Let me find out.
The skin doesn't grow back. That's what I've been told, that the skin doesn't grow back because of their condition.
So the healing process, their metabolism isn't as fast to heal the wound.
Yeah, that's what I've been told. I'm not sure though, because my family is diabetic and they have to be really careful not to get cuts because they can't like their cells don't grow back as fast.
I got it. So their rate of mitosis isn't as fast as the regular person.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Learn something new every day. That's cool. Well, I mean, it's not cool. You know what I'm saying.
Mr. Manna,
Yes.
why is it that after a big surgery they tell you like don't eat certain foods or then your blood won't clot, right?
Oh, because they don't want you to retain too much water and thin your blood. They want your blood, it's gonna sound funny, as thick as possible, as dense as possible. If you get your blood too thin, you bleed easier. That's one of the side effects of taking aspirin is aspirin will thin your blood. So usually after surgery, they won't give aspirin because it thins the blood and can lead to internal bleeding. But there are other people, to monitor their blood pressure, they take aspirin because it thins the blood and lowers their blood pressure. So it all depends on, sometimes the side effects are good news and sometimes the side effects are bad news.
Mr. Monroe,
Yes.
I have a medication that has clotting factors in it if you want me to show it, because you said you don't know anyone on the staff.
I would love for you to do that. That would be awesome. You're not obligated in any way. I would love to learn from you. 30 years in the classroom, never had a hemophiliac, my dear. You're the first.
Well, it's nice to know that. Here, let me go grab it.
Okay.
So if your blood is thin and it won't clot properly, is that because like there's just not enough what was it?
It could be that there aren't enough platelets, there aren't enough clotting factors. The blood flows through the wound so quickly because of a decreased density that the clot takes longer to form. Could be many things. It's interesting. I wanted to fix the word trauma while she's getting that. Tier A, that's right. See, I'm going to end up with all these little bags or this bag of goodies, and whoever takes my classroom over from me, I'm just going to hand it to them and go, keep these. Here's the insulin, and here's the clotting factor stuff, and here's awesome.
Okay, here it is.
Okay.
This is what the box looks like.
Could you share your screen so the
How do I do that?
image is big?
Share screen. Broadcast. It's on my iPad, so I don't really know what it's going to do.
Oh,
I'm gonna go on my camera.
you got it. You got it. You're good.
There you go. Okay. So this is what it looks like. It's called desmopressin acetate.
Okay.
And it's like a nasal spray. See, this is what it looks like.
It's a nasal spray?
Yeah. And it's usually in higher concentrations, but I guess the companies have been like struggling to produce the higher concentration ones. So this one, when I first took it, they told me I had to do 15 sprays in each nostril. It was horrible.
You absorb your clotting factors through the blood vessels in your sinuses.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to listen to this.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
Yeah, it's cool until I was sitting there in the hospital with my nose dripping out with all this stuff. It was kind of gross. But yeah.
Hey, beats the hell out of bleeding.
True.
So
yeah,
then is that
it just comes in like this tiny box, and then it's a nasal spray.
That's fascinating.
So
When we see each other face to face, if you're comfortable, may I have that box?
of course.
I would love to have that. All right. So then, do you mind if I ask you about your treatment regimen?
Yeah.
Okay. So how often do you have to take how often do you have to dose?
For me, I normally don't have to take a lot of dosages just because it's one of those things where I don't have like a very severe form of it because I
Okay.
have von Willebrand's disease,
Mhm.
which isn't like hemophilia, but it's a form of hemophilia.
Mhm.
So basically, my doctor told me that I take it whenever I like cut myself or whenever I have like severe trauma where I like cut my leg open or like even sometimes scabs. It depends on where it is.
Okay.
And that's when I take it.
Interesting. So your treatment is in response only to trauma and not to have an increased clotting factor on board all the time.
Yeah, but she says that I have to take it with me all the time because
Oh, sure.
although I don't need it all the time because I don't really need to clot all the time because I'm not that clumsy, she still tells me to take it with me places.
Right.
And not only that, but after I take it, she also said, I think it was 8-ounce cups of water that you're allowed. Like you said, you can't drink a lot of water after you take this.
Yeah, it'll thin the blood. So then whether you're an asthmatic who carries around their inhaler or whether you're someone with severe allergies that carries around their EpiPen, you carry around your clotting factors just in case it's prophylactically.
Yes.
That's fascinating. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you very much. I had no idea. Now now I have two things to look up. I need to find out about diabetics and healing cuts, and I need to find out about the nasal delivery of clotting factors. So cool. So what you guys just heard, do you know how I tell all these stories about how stuff works? Do you think I had all those stories when I first started teaching?
No.
Nope. But next year's juniors, I'll take what she just told me and I'll put those into my notes. And next year, when I talk about what is this core 3A, guess what I'm going to tell a story about?
This.
Yep. Right. In fact, I need to change my notes because earlier I said injections, right? The most common form of treatment, Jasmine just changed my notes. I love it. I just wrote for you, the most common form of treatment for hemophilia is injections. I now need to look up if injections are now the second choice and if nasal delivery is the most common form, or if injections is still the primary form and nasal, and I'll do some homework. That is fantastic. I love learning new stuff. Super cool. Thank you, Jasmine.
No problem.
Alrighty, so I should stop class about 15 minutes early, give you a chance to put your core notebook and your core exam into the folder, and then we'll lock up that folder at 3 o'clock. Please, please, please have your work in. And thank you again for the FAFSA numbers, and send me evidence when you contact the alumni. Thank you for telling them hello. Those people are fantastic, and they're you, just a little bit older. It's super cool. And I will see all of you Thursday.